Hello there. My name is Omega Magus. I'm an artist on Twitch, YouTube, Blue Sky. I'm all over the place, really. I get asked a lot about how I use vector layers to do my line work, so I'm making this quick little tutorial on the basics of vector layers in an attempt to try to make them more approachable. Oh, I should also mention that everything in this tutorial was done using Clip Studio Paint EX. It's sort of the upgraded version of Clip Studio, but it's not the most up-to-date version of Clip Studio Paint with all the bells and whistles. That being said, all the vector layer stuff I'm going to show off in this video is available in the Pro version of Clip Studio Paint as well, which is the unupgraded version. So don't feel like you need a specific version of Clip Studio Paint to do what I'm about to show off. Vector layers are really good for line work because you can take them like a cube like this, for example, and just sort of erase all the bits around where they intersect to make cleaning up line work for comics or animation or whatever you do. It's just a lot quicker and easier. And they can do a lot more than that. First things first, though, what is a vector layer? And where do I find it? Well, if you look down in the bottom right corner of your Clip Studio Paint, you'll notice this little thing where you make layers from. This is like your normal, sort of like, where you use normal raster type layers, and this one right next to it with the little cube inside, this is the vector layer button. I want to make a new vector layer with this button. Now, what can vector layers and raster layers, what makes them different from each other? What makes one better than the other? Well, if I draw on a raster layer, let's say I draw like a little box guy, and then I draw the same thing on a vector layer, there's some changes. You mean the quality of the line itself is the exact same, like you can't really see a difference off the cuff, but how you can like take care of these lines does differ. Let's say I've got my eraser tool now. If I want to erase things individually, I kind of have to go, do it a little bit by little bit. And I can make my eraser bigger if I want to just like, oh, I can get up there. But then when you get right up to the edge, you might, erase a bit too much or, not enough and leave little widgets and stuff like that. Let's say I got this little doodad here on the eye. I go right up there and then just get where I want, but not quite in, I have to be very precise with raster stuff. With vector layers, boop, 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 I can just delete what I want. Anytime lines intersect with a vector layer, you can just sort of erase the ones you don't want, making it very easy to clean up line work. Another thing, the difference between them, if you were to transform layers like this, let's say I take my raster layer here, I'm going to transform it. If I make it really big, you can notice the line quality gets a bit fuzzier, it's not as crisp. That's because each of the individual pixels is being scaled in a way that's not, it doesn't really, it's doing its best, but it's going to lose some compression issues. Same if you go really small, like right afterwards. If I go really small, it gets small normally, that makes sense. But then if I make it big again, oh, it's like extra bit crush now. I don't like that one bit. No, 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 no. Look at this, even the edges of it, like the edges of the transform cut out too. Over here on my vector though, if I were to transform this and make it really big, it stays crisp. It's still looking good. If I make it really small, same thing. Boop. It's small. It even, it changes its line width like it's supposed to, its line weight. And then if I make it big again, I didn't lose anything. That's pretty cool. Other things you can do with vector layers include, let's say I'm drawing a circle, right? That's a pretty good circle just off the cuff. It could be better. You can use this tool here, this little thing here, finger holding a line between two boxes, and it'll bring up your move layer and correct line type tools. These are all have to do with vectors and stuff. The one I'm using is pinch vector line. You can change the settings for it here, and then what that does is you can take a vector line you've drawn, and I don't like it doesn't line up quite perfectly. Well, that's easy. I can just grab where it doesn't meet and fix it. Knock off the edges, and there you go. And that's a solid shape now. It does have this little taper there with the line, but that's usually not a big enough deal for me to have to redo it. I just need it to be connected. So the pinch tool is really great for adjusting lines. If I were to take, let's say, this cylinder here, and I didn't make this meet up right at all, First of all, I can just take the object tool and make that smaller so it fits between the little sides there. But this gap here, that's all I need to do. Now, there are a couple different variations on the pinch tool. If you're looking over here, these different settings here, I use these all the time. These are the fix end tools. The left one here, I'll use right now. Basically, you can pinch it and move it around, and it'll keep wherever the two endpoints are exactly where they started. So if I need to adjust, like, oh, I need to make this a bit, you know, if I need to make this, like, what if it was like a fat cylinder? I can keep those where they are without, you know, compromising the integrity of that cylinder. Like, it stays where it needs to be. If I switch to the one with only one selected, it's going to keep the one away from the end I'm grabbing where it needs to go, or where it started. And I can just kind of like, move that around. And then if I want to move this end without moving this end, I just grab the other end of it. Easy peasy. And then it even works if you grab two different lines at the same time. It'll keep the ends you don't grab in the same spot. So yeah, any adjustments on your line work on the fly, instead of having to redraw your line just in the right spot, you can just, I'm just gonna tweak it a little bit. I'm just gonna adjust that just a smidge. I don't really use this one on the end very much, but basically what it does is that it's more freeform. You can see it does transform the line a little bit as you drag it around, but both ends are not locked in place. So if I really need to just like get that somewhere else and move it a little bit, I guess that one is available for you. I usually keep my pinch level at max and the effect range around 18, but if you ever need to adjust how much you're changing of how much you're pinching, that is available. For example, I can change it here too. This is about 200. I'm gonna switch it back to just changing 1 point. It looks the same, you know. I like to keep it small just so it's a bit more precise, and it affects less of the line. So I keep it around 18. Pinch level is basically like the intensity. Like if I keep it at, this is at level 1 now, it only just going to pinch a couple of the vector points that make up the line itself. You can do some cool effects with this if you wanted to, like, you know, oh, that's like a heart rate monitor. But I'm usually just using it to adjust my line, so I keep it at max. And yeah, play with that as much as you want. It can get some pretty interesting results. And whatever you do, you can just undo it when you're done. So, you know, no harm done. Another thing you'll want to do all the time and get used to using is the object tool for vectors, because every single line, when you draw it, that's an object. The object tool, the shortcut is O. So if I want, I can grab this one and then I can hit Control C. I can copy that real quick, and it's going to make an exact line on the same layer that looks just like it. I can then transform it. I can move it around, scale it, rotate it, you know, do whatever I want with that. You can change the way the object tool like operates with a vector over here on the left too. Actually, I'm going to switch to screen recording. I should have been doing this from the start. Okay, so object tool here on the side, right? Looks like a yellow cube being dragged by a mouse cursor. It's the operation tool, but I've got it set in the object operation. Use the mode here at the bottom to change what exactly you're changing about the vector when you grab it. So if I need to move the control points themselves, every vector is made of, you know, these individual control points. I don't use this very often, except for like when I'm doing word bubbles and stuff. But you know, it's an option if you ever need to just adjust. If you ever want to get really finicky with where the actual control points are, that's available to you. I usually keep it on scale rotate just so I can transform it quicker, just like make, you know, quick adjustments with it. And you can use the object tool like a lasso, so I can just like select what I need to use, grab that, move that around, and there we go. Or if I don't like them at all, I can hit delete and get rid of them. There's other things in here too, like you can skew it if I just want to like grab it and work on skewing it instead of, you know, transforming it. I can lock it into just skew mode. It'll just transform it along one axis at a time. Perspective, which I guess is a different version of that. This might work differently if you had like a perspective ruler on, perhaps. Distort. I'm not really sure what this one does. But I mostly just leave mine on a scaled rotate all the time, so quick adjustments on the fly. If you use the transform tool, it is a bit different. It'll grab everything on the layer and transform them together. So that's why I use the object tool separately. If I just want to adjust one individual object at a time, I can adjust one without messing with the other ones. One more thing I just remembered is that if you draw a vector line, but let's say I don't like the thickness of that line, if you use the object selector, you can then change it on the fly, the line weight itself. You know, make it as big or as little as you want. You're just using the brush size thing here. So I can draw the line, that one, make it real fat. Whoop. And yeah, little extra bonus one, line weight, that's important. So you might be wondering, what if vector layers can do all that, what can't they do? Well, I'll tell you. Let's say I want to do a little, you know, a basketball or something, right? Oh, there's a basketball. Get rid of all that stuff there. Now I want to make it orange. How am I going to do that, right? While vectors are really good at lines and, you know, things like that, they're not very good at flats. If you use the G tool for the bucket, you actually can't do flats with a vector layer on. So if I wanted to do that, I would go make a raster layer underneath it. You know, remember where the raster layer button was from before? I'll pick an orange and then I'll just sort of fill from there. Now, the bucket tool has specific settings when using with vector layers. Mine look a bit like this over here on the side. Got close gap with a little wiggle room, apply to connected pixels only, fill up to vector path, that's the important one. Make sure the vector mark is turned on. If you have it turned off, this will happen. It'll just go right through it. And also have it set to look at all layers when it's referring to stuff. Oop, and it'll just stay in there. It knows it's looking for other vector layers when it's not just reference layers or selected layers. And I'll just sort of go from there. And what you're referring to is what it's looking for. So yeah, vector layers are not good for doing flats and stuff like that. You want to do that on its own layer underneath another raster layer below that. Something else to consider is that if I'm drawing lines in red on this layer, right? This is layer 1, we'll call that. If I draw on layer 2 on top of that, and which is also a vector layer, let's say I make some blue lines going in this direction, and then I want to erase some of those lines, the blue ones here, it is going to consider all lines, you know, around it. Even if it's not on the same layer, it's still considering the vector lines below it, which is something, you know, it can get in the way if you're doing, like, let's say, if I've got a background shot with like some furniture, like a lamp and a chair or something, if I'm doing an animation, and I draw my character also in vector layers in front of that, like I'm doing like a little, he's doing a little dance or something. But I want to clean that up, and it's going to consider when I'm erasing stuff, like, oh, all of them. So it can be helpful when you're cleaning things up in multiple vector layers to duplicate essentially the background layer below it, hide one of them so you don't, you know, you're not getting rid of the original, then quickly rasterize the duplicate as a reference so you can still see the background, but now when I erase things in the vector layers, it won't consider the background anymore. So that's kind of helpful. This is a tool that I don't use super often, but it is an option if you want to, you know, use it. I've made 2 vector lines here. If I go to object and look at the control points for them, they both have quite a few control points, especially around the curves here. But say for example, I want to edit these, but I don't need that many control points. There is an option using the hotkey Y to bring up this menu for my vector manipulating stuff. I can go to simplify vector line. It's going to give me a little like big cursor, and I can draw over the vector line I want to simplify, and it's going to get rid of some of those control points. So it'll be a bit, you know, simpler. If you don't need this many to worry about, then that is a good option to have. That way, when I go back to pinching it and manipulating it, it'll be a bit easier to control. There'll be less control points for it to consider, So it'll be sort of like, it can lose its shape a bit more, and also probably save up memory space too. Not that they are super memory intensive, but you know, if that's something you're considering. Something else cool about vector layers is that you don't just have to use one kind of brush to do it. I'm doing all my examples in this tutorial with this brush, but if you wanted to, you can absolutely use any other brush you want. It still works even on the vector layer. So I can just boop, boop, you know, works just fine with this is my sketching brush. That, you know, vector works just fine. It'll obviously, you know, have those spots where they intersect it's deleting from, that if that's something that worries you, you can, you know, adjust that as you need to. But even if you wanted to, like, let's say, use a different brush entirely, like glitter, or like an effect, like this is on a vector layer. That means I can take this and I can adjust it as I need to. It'll keep the shape, and all those little spots will keep their integrity, even if I make them really big or make them really small. You know, you can adjust it as you need to. Let's make it really, stretch it out. Wow, it even looks kind of 3D. You can kind of manipulate it. Third example, just to drive the point home, how about this petal brush? If I do like a petal brush like this is still a vector layer, even though there's plenty of gaps in here. If I look at using the object tool, these are all paths with this kind of brush. So I can take my eraser, get rid of that path, maybe get rid of this one, get rid of that up there. And they'll adjust accordingly, you know, with their line and their path being shortened. They'll, you know, compensate for whatever's being deleted to keep the texture where it needs to be. But yeah, you don't have to worry about that. This is just a personal for me test. Even I don't know if this is going to work. If I go make a raster layer underneath that vector layer, will it consider when I use the fill brush as that being closed? It sure will. Look at that. I didn't even know that. That's something I just learned here on the fly. Because these are closed paths, it's still considering this to be an enclosed space with the fill brush, or the fill bucket. That's pretty cool. The last thing they can think of off the top of the head, and this is something that because I use it on the regular, here's a guy. I'm gonna clean him up a little bit. He's got little arms, got little legs. Right? There's a guy. Let's clean him up. Get rid of that, get rid of that, get rid of this little thing on his head. Intersecting points, boom, 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 boom. Oops. Keep his feet. You can have those. There's a guy. Look at that. He's pretty cool. I want to give him, let's say, a green shirt. How about that? So I'll make a raster layer underneath. Green shirt. Bam. Easy as peasy. Now, what if I do colored lines, and I don't really necessarily like this black outline? You know, it's kind of harsh. Well, you can do one of two things. Either, because this is a simple drawing, you can just select the ones you want, and then on the fly, adjust the line color itself for those objects without affecting the other ones. Now, this is a little noticeable because the order you draw things is going to come into play. Like I drew these arms after I drew the torso, so these are on top of that, you know, that line underneath it. So that's a bit noticeable. If you do it this way, you can fix that by just like, oh, I don't like the way his shirt cuts into his head here. I'll take the head, I'll Control X to cut it, Control V to paste it exactly where it was, and now because that was the most recent line, the most recent vector, it is going to go on top of these ones underneath. Another way to get around this is by making a raster layer above the vector layer, setting clipping, this little intersecting squares looking thing, clip to layer below, and then I can pick whatever color I want, right? And let's say I want to give him red arms. This one is red. Wow. This one is blue. Cool. I'm basically drawing above the layer, but it's only going to show on the layer below it. So I can make them all blue really quick. Boom, 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 boom. If I want to get right in there and get precise, I can go like, ooh, I want to make that a dark green. I can get right in there. Bam. You know, do it just the way I want it. So if you have a cool, you know, colored line art style, you can still do that too. It even works with like a spray brush. Like, so I want to make, say, like a gradient from light blue. Right, there's light blue, and then let's say it goes purple from the bottom up. So it goes purple. Colored line art, easy peasy. And then you can even take the clipping layer and change its blending mode for cool effects if you want. You can get really wacky with it. So yeah, just play with it, have fun with it. Vector layers really like open the door for me on making things a lot faster, a lot smoother. Saves a lot of time on cleanup, I tell you what. And especially when I'm doing animations, I need to I need to change how he looks from this frame, but I don't want to redraw him. But great news, because I use vector layers, I can just take him. I'm gonna put all these parts into a folder. I'm gonna transform it. Now he's sideways, and he doesn't lose any quality. So if I were to do an animation doing multiple frames of him moving around or whatever the heck, he's gonna keep that crisp lined look that I love, even if it gets really small, even if it gets really big, and even if he wishes for you to have a nice day. Like, that's all you need. It's gonna be great. Play with it, have fun with it. Vector layers are not as imposing as they may seem. The rasters will get transformed underneath the vector layer, so keep that in mind for if you're doing lots of like colors and stuff. But the vectors themselves will stay true to form. That is all I can really think of for this tutorial. This is my first time doing something like this, and it's probably a little rough, but I plan on making more tutorials in the future, specifically in regards to how I animate in Clip Studio, and some other tips and tricks I've learned over the years. But if you have any questions or things you want me to talk about in particular, feel free to leave a comment and let me know. I'll try to do a follow-up and answer as many as I can in future videos. You're also welcome to subscribe to the channel if you want to see more animations and stuff by me. Like the video, hit the bell, whatever buttons make the channel work, I really appreciate it. You can follow me on Twitch at twitch.tv/omegamagus. I stream 4 times a week, doing mostly art streams and gaming streams. And you can follow me on Blue Sky if you want to see my art and other silly stuff that I post. I am Omega Magus over there too. Thank you very much for watching, have a great one, and remember that tomorrow is just another chance to kick ass. I believe in you, so go do it.